All right, we'd like to welcome everyone. Welcome everyone back to the Trampled Underfoot Podcast show. Here on YouTube, we go live every Tuesday at 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific, and your hosts are Mark Lindsay and Eloy Escagedo. Welcome. What's going on, Mark?
It's just been one of those weeks. I mean, craziness all the way around, trying to get caught up on everything and get some work done. Working out in the yard while the ground is soft enough to dig and just getting rock laid out where it's supposed to be and what have you. It's. I'm getting too old for this. I'm slowing down. Other than that, everything's cool. How's it going out there in your neck of the woods?
Well, it's been pleasant as far as the temperature is concerned. We've had the residuals of the weather from further up north, and so we've had pleasant climate, which is and we'll roughly have that for a few months now. Oh, well, for like a month or two, maybe a month and a half of pleasant, where it's not just dripping wet wherever you go. So that's good.
Yeah, we're in the middle of that ourselves. We're in the rain fog cycle. I mean, we get 3 months of good weather in the summertime. Sounds like you get 3 months of good weather in the wintertime.
That's basically the story for us, because we're kind of like where we're at. Hey, so I want to mention something. I don't know if you have stuff lined up. Oops, wait. I just exposed the fact that we don't know what each of us are going to talk about. It's no secret, but I did want to mention that I saw the 6-hour Let It Be release by Apple, the Beatles, Peter Jackson of Lord of the Rings renowned. And it
has been released.
It has been released.
Okay. I know there's been a lot of small clips that have been showing up in my suggested. I've watched a few, but I didn't realize that the whole thing had been released now. Where is it? Is it like on Netflix or something like that? Or
no, it's on Disney Plus.
Okay.
And there's a lot there. My thoughts on it. Would you like me to share a couple of the thoughts, see what you think?
Before we do, I just wanted to say one thing to all of our friends worldwide who happen to be Catholic or of Scottish extraction. I want to wish you all a happy St. Andrew's Day. St. Andrews being the patron saint of Scotland. Scots worldwide are celebrating. That's their national holiday. It didn't pick up as much traction here in the U.S. as St. Patrick's Day, who was the patron saint of Ireland. But Scots all over the place, they're celebrating in their own way.
Very good. Very good. Well, I mean, I don't know how to. So, well, Paul McCartney was Irish.
Yeah.
Partly.
Yeah. He was.
So that's how I segue back into what I was in. So nothing. 6 hours of footage. The original footage was recorded in the late 60s, 69, something like that. And the Beatles were planning to do a movie with the recording that they were going to do, and they were going to top it off with a show at the end, which ended up being the rooftop show that they did. Was very in the 80s. For me, I had the bootleg VHS copy of that 1970s non-release or release. I forget but I had a bootleg copy where the audio was all out of whack, and it was just a horrible thing. Well, it was a fantastic thing, but now in comparison to watching so this is 6 hours, the ability to consume 6 hours of, and what they mostly are doing is basically practicing and joking around and playing, they're just honing in and arguing and all the things. So it's kind of like a diary of that time, and that's how they went for it. So for the average viewer, in my opinion, and somebody did there's been a lot of review videos
Right.
that have come out as well. And in my opinion, the one guy, which by the way, this is a funny twist of before I had seen it, I saw this guy's review and he said, but to be honest, it's kind of long, it's kind of this, so the average viewer, and I actually viewing that before seeing I thought, this guy's a jerk. How dare he, but, and the other people were like, it's awesome. You're going to sit through the whole thing and this and that. But the guy that I thought was like, man, this guy, what's he on about? Just goes to show. I agree with him. For the casual viewer, I think that a condensed with good stuff sort of release on par with the long extended for your deep dive people. So in the future, it would be a good idea. So in the future, maybe they do a condensed so that people that aren't willing to sit through all that, maybe they don't know about the Beatles, but they're not going to give it a chance. Talking about kids today and whatnot. Maybe a condensed thing, putting in all the good stuff within a condensed time would open up the gates for people to get turned on to the Beatles.
Well, I have a couple of questions for you now. I'm not real up on it because, again, cultural infidel status here. This is more or less a documentary on the making of the album Let It Be, or is it just a snapshot in time kind of a thing?
They had a lot of hours that they filmed, and the idea was to film the process of the Beatles working on an album,
right,
and finish it off with a live performance. And what ended up happening is that they had a lot of troubles during that time, and so the project was kind of shelved. Although the album did come out, but it actually came out after the Beatles had basically broken up. So what happened was that they had Abbey Road come out, which they recorded after Let It Be, and then they had the residuals of Let It Be, and so it kind of worked in a weird way where Let It Be actually ended up being the last album, even though it was the second to last album. So what this is kind of like they have like a calendar, and then they start scratching off day by day, and they take you through the footage of every day for like a month or something like that. And then they go back to the calendar every time the day switches to the next. And within each section, you're going to have your Beatles interacting with each other and the infamous arguments amongst each other as well. So it unfolds as they experienced it in the movie format. Obviously, they're not going to film George Harrison taking a leak in the back, but so you're getting a very, and for people that are into the Beatles totally, you're getting a very good picture of what happened. So that's why I said a condensed version would have been, a good in the future could be a good thing for those people that are willing. So I went through the whole thing, but I skipped the second and third episodes. I skipped a little bit, because they're rambling through newspapers and so on. Good stuff in there, but I'm not gonna, go and do that.
Going back through stuff you already knew about, or
so
already knew.
Right. So I went to the points where, and I missed a lot of stuff because I skipped.
Well, it's 6 hours.
The first one I saw completely. So it was a sit down of 2 hours. The second one I skipped through, and the third one likewise, capturing good moments of them working on songs that I had not heard the way they had done it, and different little ideas. So I worked it that way because 6 hours is 6 hours.
Yeah. So so this is in 3 2-hour episodes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So it's not just one 6-hour marathon.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That makes it a little bit easier to digest. Like I said, cultural infidel status here. I was under the impression it was still being worked on. I did not know it had been released. So I'm going to have to look into it. I am interested. I know you are very, very interested. And I'm kind of surprised to hear that you skipped through any of the episodes. But I don't know if you've seen any of Ken Burns's films.
Ken Burns. The name is familiar to me. I can't right now for the life of me.
He is a filmmaker and documentarian who picks a topic. Like he picked baseball, and he
Oh,
went through the
yep,
whole
I know.
history of
Now I
baseball.
know.
Then he did the Civil War,
Now I
and he
know.
went
Yeah,
through the whole history of the Civil War. He's
yeah.
a dynamite filmmaker.
That's the one I saw, the Civil War one of his.
So a Ken Burns style of movie, documentary, using this footage would have been better, you think?
Well, for my, but better is, it's a very difficult. So look, this is not made, in my opinion,
Mm-hmm.
in any stretch of the imagination, from my perspective, for a person. You're getting, there's no, the story you're getting is like, let's say you put a camera in front of Mark Lindsay while he was building his shed, but Mark Lindsay isn't explaining anything to the camera. It just so happens that Mark Lindsay and the guy that brought in, the certain product to continue the building of it, he has an interaction with him, and it's all being filmed. When Mark Lindsay sits down to eat lunch, there in the workshop that he's building, they're filming that, and if he's having a conversation, so it's kind of like a diary of like, just there's no.
Okay, so it's just raw footage.
It's pretty much raw footage.
Okay.
And there's titling, so they'll explain, this is the first time this is heard, or this is Paul beginning his Get Back song. It shows how Paul starts Get Back with the bass. I had never seen this footage. There's a lot of footage. So here's the thing. I'm older than I was when I was younger.
Well,
and when I first listened to the Beatles. And so being older and at this so I've already generally consumed the information. There's new information there, but for me to sit through 6 hours of it, I just, I mean, it doesn't mean I won't go back and, but it's like people are in different places during different times of their life. And, if I was a kid, I probably would have been, because it's the first time that I'd seen, and just, it's like the first time it's like the second time it's like the third, it's like the first time you heard the Beatles, or even better, the first time you actually sat down with a record of the Beatles and started to hear all this stuff and that excitement. That's not there at this stage. So that's an explanation roughly of why
basically the building of each song or various different songs. Because I mean, between McCartney, Lennon, Harrison, and Starr, they made they wrote what, 600 songs, something like that. A huge ton of music.
Yeah, a few hundred songs. I don't know if it's 600.
Yeah, well, it may not be 600, but I mean, they wrote a ton of music in their relatively short time together. And their growth musically, as well as their maturing as a band, it was a very short time span. You got to figure that Please Please Me, I believe, was released in America in 1963. And Sgt. Pepper came out in 1967. So 4 years between Please Please Me and Sgt. Pepper. And the growth and development they went through in 4 short years is just mind-numbing. So to try to condense what was supposed to be not the next album, but a couple albums after that, I mean, just condensing it down into 6 hours, that's a long time to you and me. But I think I agree with you. Sight Unseen 6 hours, you would have to be a diehard Beatle fan to watch it all in one sitting. I mean, just an absolute fanatic, not just a fan. And I mean, it needed to be put out there. I agree with them editing it all together and releasing it and what have you. But were they hoping to attract a younger audience to the Beatles? Because I don't think that's how you do it.
I don't think that that's if you're a musician,
Mm-hmm.
more a musician leaning towards engineering and process or songwriting, let's say, I could see how you'd be, down with the plan to a certain extent. 6 hours. So Peter Jackson did this edit. He was the editor and all that, and he did the Lord of the Rings movie,
Right.
and his movies are extremely long, the Lord of the Rings, because the books were long.
Mm-hmm.
And
yes,
so, but this is not necessarily, apples to apples here, but at some level, just length of time and the fact that it's the same director. Jackson was creating on film a work of literature that included a story that progressed, which is, even though you were talking a 2-hour movie broken up in 3 parts with Lord of the Rings, let's say, and then The Hobbit, I think, was in 2 parts or 3 parts, but they're long. But it's a progression of a story with characters coming in and out, and then there's explosions and violence and drama and this and that, and it's pre-planned to continue the thinking, the process, of the viewer.
right.
Whereas, so, that 2 hours on the Lord of the Rings can go, especially if you're interested, but can go very quick. It's not the only movie like that. But as far as this, it's kind of document. So who were they aiming to? I don't know that they're aiming to. I think that they were doing it for the fans that for decades were wondering, what the heck are we ever going to see this? So I think they did it with that in mind.
Okay.
I mean, to one extent, with that in mind.
So you didn't really see anything there other than, like you said, a serious musician or somebody who wants to be an engineer or a songwriter or somebody like that.
Or a historian.
You didn't really see anything there that would attract somebody who'd never really paid attention to the Beatles to start listening to their music.
No, because there's no, because, I mean, is there anything there? Yeah, within 6 hours, there's stuff there,
right?
But it's not laid out in a way that you could get someone that's completely oblivious to the world of the Beatles, let's say, and there's nothing for them. At the beginning, they have a history that runs up to the point of the making of Let It Be. So they do have this section where it starts from their beginning on. So it's to catch the viewer up. But I don't see any like Whitney Houston fans. I'm taking 2 words and mashing them together. Or Justin
Molly Cooper.
So I'm not, so I don't see any people in that realm, which is the majority of people, roughly. I'm not saying for sure, but most people are totally into the more sort of like I don't want to say
modern music.
Yeah, let's say that. I was gonna say shallow, but just the same. I was gonna say shallow and soulless.
Well,
and I had some other derogatory terms.
Well, now to be fair, there isn't a whole lot of, and this is going to be the world's worst pun. There's not a whole lot of depth to Octopus's Garden, so
Okay, so you can make no.
But then again, you take something like A Day in the Life, or She's Leaving Home, and you've got a completely different style of depth there.
No, but
So,
I get what you're saying, but I
mhm,
will, in order to, I'll push back on Octopus's Garden as a song itself,
mhm,
floating in the ether,
mhm.
without the context of the album.
Uh-huh.
One could go in that direction, but within the
Yeah,
context,
yeah, I agree. It's kind of a goofy song. That's all there is to it. It's kind of a goofy song by itself.
right? But in the context of the so the thing is that there's also the problem of nowadays we don't look at albums,
Right.
generally speaking,
Right.
but there was an artistic sort of premise of the unfolding of an album from beginning to end,
Yeah.
where you're taken through a journey, and it's kind of like musical movements in some sort of, like,
Right.
classical or opera or whatever. So you will have downtimes in the depth department so that you can
Mhm,
level out, before you get to the heavy. So in the context of that,
mhm.
you could bring it back into the context of that. Yeah, it works, but a
Oh, it
song,
did work, obviously.
well, it did work, but like, let's take your average pop band of today. It starts with baby, baby, shake, baby, shake, baby, booty, 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 shake, shake, booty, booty three, booty four, booty five, six, seven, eight, booty, shallow, shallow. Um, then the next song is kind of like a derivative of that and that and that. By the end of the album, you are so empty. Well, not that I've ever done it, but I could
Well,
imagine.
but see, you're assuming they put out albums. I don't even know. Do they still make albums?
Even when they made albums and
Uh-huh.
they had
Uh-huh.
uh, here's your 45 minutes of pop soulless music for you listeners. I would just say,
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with
I
you.
would just say that.
I'm with you. Okay, since we're on this subject here, well, I'll go ahead and say it. No, I have not seen it. I did not know it was out yet. I think I'm repeating myself now.
Yeah.
I will look into it because I am interested. I've been watching the clips. Like I said, there's been a whole bunch of 15-second to minute and a half long clips show up in my suggesteds on YouTube, and I've watched a bunch of them. So I am interested, but I'll have to probably split it up over the course of several nights because, as I say, 6 hours is a long stretch for any subject. I mean, it could be your absolute passion, your absolute favorite thing that you can't live without. 6 hours of it is a long, long time.
So that's why I refer to, I think that it was, there's got to be more to it than that, but I think that there was at some level the idea of giving the public at large that for decades, because people for decades, and we're talking about endless amounts of articles, interviews, it
Yeah.
just endless and endless amounts, and people uh, have always been incredible fans of, and not only that, in the popular music community, everybody refers back to the Beatles
Yeah.
in a continuous fashion. I
Yeah.
mean, there's no, so I
Well, they were
think they were,
trailblazers.
yeah, well, I think that yes, they were, I mean, undeniably,
Hmm.
and you could look at it in so many different ways as to why, but um, I think that they're saying, this is all the stuff, here you go for those people, because I don't see a today's version of a teeny bopper sitting through it unless there's something in their brain, because that's a thing.
Yeah, I think it's part presentation as well because I'm not as much as I used to be, but I there are still a few video reactors, music reactors that I follow,
Hmm.
and they're more and more of them are getting into Beatles, and there is one girl who is listening to entire albums, and she has to edit it obviously for copyright purposes. But I just watched last week or earlier. Yeah, it was last week. She did Sergeant Pepper, and she's taking them chronologically in order of the release in the U.S. And she did Sergeant Pepper a couple weeks ago, and she's digesting it. But she's also a musician, and she's making note of chord changes and oh wow, they went with an A minor here when they could have gone. It's strange to hear that jump down in that direction, and then the harmonies went up in the other direction, and then you could hear the bass go in a different direction off it. And she just kind of breaks it down and analyzes the whole thing before she ever even gets into lyrics. And she admits right off the bat that she listens to music before she even considers lyrics, even though she has lyrics right there with her. And she goes song by song through the entire album. And if one song blends into the next, she'll back up to hear that transition. I don't know what she's going to do when she gets to Abbey Road, because side two is just going to kind of, screw that all up.
Yeah.
But she's a 20 something and has been totally captivated by it. But then again, as I say, she is a serious musician. So, and she does have some musical training, because you can tell when you speak to somebody who has been classically trained or studies music, and I mean in an academic setting. You can tell when you're talking to that person, just the language that they use. And when they start talking about diatonic scales and pentatonic scales and things like this, you're like, okay, this is a person who's a serious analyst. And that's what she is. But she's also got 3 or 4 of her friends now listening to him, because she's like, no, you got to hear this. You got to listen to this. So there is a younger audience for him, is what I'm getting at in all of this stuff. And it's not just her. She's just one example. There are several other channels out there that are listening to Beatles and reacting to Beatles tunes, what they can, that won't get taken down for a copyright strike. You end up with chopped up videos where you're not getting all of the audio. But if you are out to just listen to a Beatles song, you're just going to put on a Beatles song. If you're out to see if a kid, comparatively speaking, compared to us anyway, if someone who's 19, 20, 21 is actually enjoying this kind of music, you're there for it. You don't necessarily have to hear the music yourself, just to gauge their reaction. So a lot of the older stuff and a lot of the Beatles is catching on, with the exception of Yoko Ono, but she wasn't a Beatle. So there.
Yeah. So
it had to be said.
we can't deny, or we can't go into people's brains to see what is necessarily going on when they consume the Beatles today, or if they. So what I'm thinking about what you just said, these people that are on there are consuming the Beatles for the first time through the medium, or in the context of publishing a video so that other people can see their reaction through YouTube, which has different things going on in itself.
Right. It does.
Which is not the same as a kid back in the day with nothing other than the album or record in his hands.
Right.
So I guess what I'm going for is that in the context of the past, with the either you could say either limitations or advantage in limitation, it was a different way of, it was readily available to appreciate it in the context of that time.
Right.
And so you may, there was a whole, I guess, what would you call, an unraveling of a culture that was occurring without the layers that exist now. So basically what I'm saying is that they see it in the context of all the information that exists today.
Right.
Whereas back in the past, I consumed it with all the information that existed in the 80s, let's say,
Right.
up to that point.
And
Whereas you consumed it
in the
with the,
70s.
right.
So
So there was, well, go ahead.
they were releasing music when I was a kid. They were still together as a band. But as I said, Please Please Me really hit in America in 63, I want to say. I was 2 years old. So I don't remember that. I don't remember personally Beatlemania. I remember a little bit of it, but just little short, brief flashes of memory because I was very, very young and, things happen. But so I was listening to it. I was, let's see, Abbey Road came out in what, 69, 68. I don't remember when Abbey Road came out.
At this point, I can't say. I think 69, but
I bought it in like 1970. So I was 9 years old when I bought Abbey Road. But I absolutely loved that album. And I had heard Beatles songs growing up. But according to my mother, these were the dirtier Beatles. These weren't the Beatles that she liked with, She Loves You and Please Please Me. And I Saw Her Standing There. That was the Beatles that she liked.
Yeah.
They remembered the Beatlemania and everybody going crazy over it. But she didn't share in that growth because that quote unquote wasn't her style of music. She didn't like that type of music, and they became dirty in her opinion. She was that 3-minute pop song person. Don't get me wrong, there were songs that they put out that she did like, but like when I played Abbey Road, my dad loved Come Together. She could take it or leave it. She absolutely hated Oh Darling because John Lennon it was Paul McCartney who sang Oh Darling. He screamed, and she did not like any of that at all. So I had to put on headphones to listen to that album. But again, I was consuming it after the fact. I wasn't buying the singles as they were released, and I wasn't buying the albums. There were several albums I didn't have. I didn't have Rubber Soul till I was in my 20s. So I was playing catch up in much the same way you were playing catch up, even though I was alive when they were still recording. So you can hear the influence. When I said they were trailblazers before, you can hear the influence on other bands. And I'm not talking about the carbon copies like the Beau Brummels or Paul Revere and the Raiders, or even the Byrds when they first started. There were a bunch of Beatle knockoff bands. But you can hear the influence even today in other bands that have picked up on that John Lennon, Paul McCartney magic, and have worked a lot of their engineering styles into their own music. I mean, you can't deny the influence, but still 6 hours. I mean,
no, it's there, so you can take it or leave it. On that level, at least it's there for people that can,
and I'm glad they did it because it needed to be released. It needed to be done.
Yeah, it's just not, like I mentioned before, in the context of, going to see a movie that has a pre-planned story built in order to get the viewer to the next stage of the because there's things that happen in a theatrical release, writers and so on, and as we know, they use tools, visual dialogue, and just all sorts of things in order to move the story along in a certain way. Well, this is actual people in time, doing what they naturally did to produce an album. And so like when you read a Beatles book biography, it's written with that information from the writer's perspective, but it's still using the filter of the book in order to progress. So whereas this video, it'll just do the footage, and then maybe a little banner on the bottom saying, and this is Paul's first attempt of discovering the song, Get Back.
Yeah.
Yeah. And stuff. So there's no intent apparent to me. They're putting the good stuff in and giving you a chronological journey.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
okay. And all in all, at the end of the day, you are watching people at work.
You're watching people at work.
Yeah. Because I'm sure it's more than just those four. I mean, there were engineers and producers talking and everything else, correct?
Yeah. One cool thing I always liked. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of cool things. By the way, there's a lot of cool things in it. It's just, again, there's this hour, this time, length of time situation. But one thing that I always liked, and these are little subconscious things, and I wonder what people capture in their field of view when they see an event, as opposed to what I've always been fascinated is, did you notice that? Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I noticed it. Or did you notice that? No, dude, what do you mean? What do you mean? What do I mean? Didn't you notice that? Nope, didn't. Because people from person to person, we're all observers from our vantage point out towards the universe, and we're focused on whatever we can't focus on everything, obviously. So people capture different things from different from the same event.
Yeah.
And sometimes those things they capture from the same event are usually the same things, but oftentimes as well, they'll capture different. And then now you have insights and people, and this is how it works. Yeah. Well, Paul McCartney during the rooftop thing, they're singing their songs, and as you know, because you've seen the footage, more than likely you've seen the original footage. Mm-hmm. The Bobbies are walking down the street, knocking on the door, getting in, and they're working their way up to stop the Beatles because they're causing a ruckus, and they had been flooded with phone calls because they're playing up on the roof, and all of London is being flooded with Beatle music.
Yeah.
And it was not staged, by the way. It was real. Like they planned for it. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't it be great if we got arrested and that'd be the end of the show? So these people are thinking in these terms. And so what I've always thought was cool was that as they were winding down and the police got through that rooftop door, and it was about to come to a head, Paul McCartney's still in the middle of the song. The band are winding it down, though, and Paul McCartney is singing out. He says, "Get back home, Loretta. You might get arrested tonight," or something like that. And I always perceived that it's so obvious. It's obvious, but it's Paul McCartney realizing the situation, adding it to the song. But he's actually talking about himself. Oh, we might be arrested tonight. But he did it like a bold, chest.
Defiant.
A defiant chest out to the world and to authority, because he said, "This is our climax here. This is our thing." And I always thought that was really cool because in his little way, even though they're singing all these things and they are being rebellious, it's tame compared to some other crazy things. And so I liked that moment. And then they shut down, and John says, "I hope we pass the audition." And they walk off.
Oh man. Well, they were risk takers, they were trailblazers. Now, I got a question for you. You're much more of a Beatles diarist than I am. You've read biographies and several books on the subject, where I'm a more pedestrian listener. But I've read and I've heard it said that Rubber Soul was the pivotal album for them. They kind of changed styles right around Rubber Soul. Okay. And then started that upward growth that led into Sergeant Pepper and eventually Abbey Road, then Let It Be. I don't know if you agree with that statement or not, but let's say, for example, they didn't release Rubber Soul. Do you think they would have become the powerhouse they did become? Do you think they would have become as influential as they did become? Because if they didn't release Rubber Soul, I think you're stopped at Help. I think Help was the album before Rubber Soul. Am I wrong there?
I think they had Beatles for Sale, then it was Help, and then it was Rubber Soul. I think
Right.
that's wait a
Right.
second. It was Please Please Me, followed by With the Beatles. I'm going by our reckoning in America release.
Right.
I think, or maybe their
Well,
reckoning. It was Please Please Me, Beatles for With the Beatles, followed by what you call no, one or the other. It was either Help, then Beatles for Sale, or Beatles for Sale, then Help.
okay.
But then came Rubber Soul.
Yes. So Rubber Soul came out. It was the album released after Help. And most folks say that the Rubber Soul was that pivotal moment where they changed style. They got out of that poppy, that kind of poppy sound,
Yeah.
and started being a little bit more serious and started being a lot more adventurous and a lot more exploratory. If they had, that's my question. If they hadn't have made that change with Rubber Soul and then Revolver and Sergeant Pepper, would they have become as influential as they were, or would they be seen now as just another pop band of the early 60s?
Well, luckily, with that question and the fact that one of our listeners, Kilroy Odessa Woodworking, posted this. I know we're not supposed to break the
Fourth wall just yet.
the fourth wall, but in the context of what we're talking about here, I would say, by the way, the order was Please Please Me, With the Beatles, Hard Day's Night, Beatles for Sale, Help, then Rubber Soul. So in the context of what you're saying, I would say, in my opinion, that once you got into Help, which was a film,
right?
Beatles for Sale before Help was they've explained, and I can see why, dark album. And what happened was that, but dark is not in the context of what we would consider dark in, like, let's say the 70s, 80s, 90s, or today. Right. It was dark in that there was a little bit of melancholy and such. So there was a definite change there. But Help, the actual album Help, includes some very strange deviations from your normal pop song, up to that point. And Rubber Soul,
but not as much as Rubber Soul did. Rubber Soul was a massive shift.
No. But I agree. But what I'm saying is, it's not like it was a complete. Now it's Rubber Soul and all. I'm saying that you can see in Help what is to come, even if it's a very light sort of comparison, but you could see that something is happening recording wise. Actually, I think they changed engineers too, but Rubber Soul was pivotal because they really started going into I guess it was weird because it was a dry sound recorded, that album. It was dry in that the echo and such were limited, whereas before you'd have a flooding of, as was with the times, a flooding of echo to enrich the recording. But once they did that, other people started copying this very dry, and in the 70s they went back and took from that style to mute and lessen the dampness of recordings. So on that level, plus the context of what they were writing about was very different, very
Right.
weird.
Right.
So would they have? Um, I think it's impossible. So if they wouldn't have gone in that direction, and Rubber Soul was the beginning of that in a large, I would have to say that if they wouldn't have done Rubber Soul and they wouldn't have thought in that direction, they would not have. We're supposing a lot of things, right?
We are. This is 100% conjecture and
Right.
100% opinion.
Right. In my opinion, they would have done it anyhow, like in the way I think.
Right.
But it limiting that angle,
Mm-hmm.
if they wouldn't have gone down that Rubber Soul road, they didn't think about in those terms, they would have kept producing stuff from. So I personally think that they would have ended up where they did anyhow. But Rubber Soul is the pivotal moment,
Okay.
where that psychedelia and that
Right.
strangeness began.
And if you look at that timeline, Please Please Me to Rubber Soul was 2 years. So you have a band that became wildly popular. I mean, international phenomenon, because Beatlemania was not an American thing. It was a worldwide thing. They got the same reaction in Copenhagen and in Berlin and wherever they went. They got the same reaction and the same welcome. For a band to become that wildly popular in a span of 2 years, then morph their music into something completely different from what they were playing. Because you listen to Please Please Me and you listen to Rubber Soul, you would swear they were two different bands.
Yeah.
If you were just going in cold and had never heard a Beatles tune in your life and you listened to Please Please Me, then you listened to Rubber Soul, you would swear they were two different groups. That, along with a few other things, the Kinks with their amplified distortion and a bunch of other groups jumping on board. I mean, the Rolling Stones and then the Who. And I mean, those three were kind of sort of in a mild-mannered competition between the Who, the Stones, and the Beatles. The Beatles didn't think so, but the Who and the Stones did, because they had to. It's like, if they can do it, we can do it, and they never did. I mean, don't get me wrong; they're excellent groups, they're excellent bands, but they're not the Beatles. Nobody is the Beatles, and that's all there is to it.
There's no way around it. There's no. Obviously, it's a personal. Obviously, it's a personal sort of like your point of view thing. But I will add that if you take a survey, and it has been done, people across the world by far choose the Beatles.
I'm not doubting that at all. But you could hear with the release of Rubber Soul, then Revolver, the Rolling Stones changed, and the Who changed, and a whole bunch of other British bands changed. It kind of, I won't say a direct imitation of the style shift of the Beatles, but a direction shift that kind of paralleled or attempted to parallel the Beatles.
A derivative of.
Yes, things got a lot harder. Things got a lot firmer. Things were more experimental. We weren't stuck with the 2.5 minute AM radio pop ditty anymore. We were doing 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 minute long tunes. We were exploring orchestral additions. We were introducing new instruments and taking advantage of advances of technology that you couldn't do when it was 45 records for Susie and her friends, So they kind of grabbed hold of the skirts, I guess, the coattails of the Beatles, and tried to follow along in that trajectory. And music was the beneficiary of it, of the whole thing.
People were.
Yeah. I mean, music as a whole was the beneficiary, because think of the bands that we wouldn't have had if they hadn't have made that turn and forced everybody to turn with them. Because
at some point there's going to be so remember that we talked about months ago, I forget the episode, but within that episode, we talked about the movie Imagine, where that guy comes out and gets like lights flicker all across the world, and all of a sudden, this musician guy that's a regular Joe somewhere
Oh
in
yeah,
America,
yeah.
he ends up like the only guy that remembers the Beatles, and he starts playing it and becomes famous and all that, but the world forgot that the Beatles existed and so on. So um minus having the Beatles exist,
Hmm.
um I I wouldn't it wouldn't be difficult for me to imagine the possibility of maybe not the exact same events occurring, but some other event with some other group of people
Yes.
stumbling on, hey man, why don't we just turn up the volume and like kick
Well,
our and
yeah.
stomp our feet, you know?
The Kinks is a prime example of that, because the amplified distortion that they applied had nothing to do with the Beatles.
But
That was one guy.
but with the context of, if not for the Beatles, somebody else would have. That's in the world of, the imagination,
Right.
speculation. In the world of reality,
Hmm.
officially, undoubtedly, it was the Beatles that did what they did, that influenced so many people and stuff.
Right.
But but
Exactly.
but at the same time, what's cool about this whole thing is that it need not be a solid, and that's, this
No,
is
no, 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 no.
well, no, let me say it need not be a solid sort of like, this is the Beatles, and like just like the horse with the covering of the because of the Beatles, like you mentioned, other people started doing derivatives. But what's cool about music, which isn't it's universal language, is that these ideas get churned into some new creation monster that people can then look towards and say, holy smokes, look at
Well,
this band or look at that band.
yes,
So as
but
in conclusion to this, we do not we do not know. Well, we kind of get the we kind of get the idea because many people mention it, but we do not know how far the stretch into places where you would listen to a song and say, there's nothing Beatles related, but that the artist himself is thinking, man, this is such a bite from the Beatles, but they're so distant from it, but in their
well,
head they're associating it. Stuff
yeah.
like that.
Well, something else to think about, though, is how many of those bands would have ever gained any traction in America if it hadn't been for the Beatles? Because the Beatles were the first of the British invasion. Would there have been a British invasion without them? Because all those other groups, the Kinks, the Who, the Herman's Hermits, I mean, name a British band at the time. The British invasion was gigantic. Would there have been that invasion without the Beatles blazing the trail? So
Now,
that's another thing to look at when figuring out this context of, would they have become the powerhouses they became? It's possible, but I don't know how likely, because you can only go so far on bubblegum pop. And I think Paul McCartney and John Lennon realized that, which is why they wanted to experiment and push so much further. I don't know if it's just they were tired of doing the type of music that they were doing, or they didn't want to be known for just that, or they just wanted to push the limit. But the fact that they did push the limit brought a lot of people with them and gave us the music we have now.
but they talk about the reasons, like from there, and even it's funny, even though they mention the reasons, and there's varying interviews and stuff, even though they mention the reasons themselves to one degree or another, it's interesting to note that even through the lens of what they perceive and remember, talking about Paul McCartney and Ringo and even the other
Mhm.
ones when they were still around, um, with this documentary, they asked Peter Jackson a couple of interesting questions, and it went in this direction. Um, so tell us about what Paul's perception and this and that was to all this, and we know that there was like issues during the recording, and he said that Peter Jackson said, when I talked to Paul, his memories of it was that it was not a great time, and there was a lot of negativity and of this and that and that, even though he acknowledged the great songs and so on, because he still plays them and so on, but it was enveloped in this cloud of all this and that. But that the footage, because nobody's going to say, even Paul McCartney, they're not going to sit through endless hundreds of,
Yeah.
So, but once he made, Peter Jackson created this release, you could see the Beatles having fun. Yes, they're arguing, but they're also having a lot of fun, joking around, even during that time that we all perceive as, and even Paul McCartney perceives as, a negative time. So, so the memories of the Beatles from back then, even they are cloudy in the whole scope and
Right.
dynamic of interaction amongst people. So we don't only have bad times and good times, but we remember arbitrary, or not arbitrary, but we remember it from a
Yes.
certain, we grab onto a certain thing, and then it's all through the lens of that. So we're not, memory is an incredible thing. So it's interesting to see that even Paul McCartney saw it as one thing, and now he says, "Oh, well, wait a second, wow! So we did have a great time." Just
Yeah.
cool stuff like that.
Well, I think that comes down to optimism or pessimism on whether you're a glass half full or a glass half empty kind of guy. I mean, you can. I look back at my military service and I seem to remember the good stuff. I remember the fun we had. I remember it was hard work at times, but I don't remember the bad stuff until Linda and I get, traveling down memory lane and I start thinking about, oh, yeah, I remember guard duty and Grafenwehr and this and that and the rain and you do start remembering the bad stuff and how much it sucked. And you start thinking, oh, physical fitness tests and all this other kind of junk and say, yeah, it wasn't all fun and games. You did have to work hard at it. And there was the typical Army BS. So I think it's selective memory on what we choose to remember and how we choose to remember it. And
I don't agree with choose. I
um
don't agree with
well,
choose.
maybe choose is the wrong word, but I think that comes down to I do think it comes down to a choice where you can try to remember the good stuff and try to flush the bad stuff.
You have to actively do that.
Yeah.
But passively, see, that's the thing. Like, let's say we have an encounter.
And that's what I mean. And that's what I mean when I say it comes down to personality. Are you an optimistic personality or a pessimistic personality? Because people with a more pessimistic tendency are going to tend to remember the bad stuff more than they'll remember the good stuff. But internal conflict is a part of just about every songwriter that I've ever listened to that's worth their salt. So,
so there's a passive. So I have a problem with it in that you have to actively. So if you want to preserve certain memories, obviously you take a photograph or write a diary, and then you refer to it. But if you're passively interacting in the world, so I think that a lot of memories occur or are recorded with the biggest moment in that memory, for whatever reason. I guess it could come down to so if somebody says, hey, you're a son of a gun, in not so many kind words, you're gonna remember that if you remember it.
And it would also have to do with your strongest emotion at the time as well.
Right.
Because if during that, if during a 1 month stretch of time, you are continually mad that things are going bad, that's what you're going to think. You're not really going to tend to think about the good stuff that came out of that.
Yeah. I mean, they do talk about, I don't know, I found this memory thing, and you're so I don't disagree that there's positive people and half empty people, as far as like their, so I'm not disagreeing with that, but as far as our ability to on the subconscious level, I'm kind of thinking to myself, no, well, there's things that that we don't have awareness control of, and we might remember a certain way, and we just simply, because it was just part of our existence at the time.
Right.
So I found that whole thing that you mentioned curious. So both things can be true. You can control. I guess you can control. I'm less partial to what you're of the control of, you can control.
Well, maybe
certain things.
maybe choice is the wrong word to use. Maybe it is, just unconscious or subconsciously. Maybe it's not a thing that you're even aware of. But if you have a bad vibe during an experience, you're probably going to tend to think of that bad vibe in a similar experience, even if it's a good thing. I mean, I don't know if you've heard the old joke about the parents who had twin sons, and one of them was an optimist and one of them was a pessimist, and they were taking him to the psychologist to try to bring the pessimist out of his funk and get the optimist to see some reality to life. And so the psychologist finally says, okay, here's what you do. We need something extremely good to happen to the pessimist and something extremely bad to happen to the optimist. Nothing harmful, nothing that'll, harm him in any way. But they both need a little dose of reality to get them out of this. So their birthday came up and they decided, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to get the pessimist a pony, and we're going to give the optimist a pile of horse manure. So birthday morning, they wake up, the kids come down the stairs. Here's your present, Jimmy. Here's a nice shiny white pony. And the pessimist is like, oh man, now I got to be responsible for it. I got to take care of it. I got to wash it. I got to brush it. I don't want this stupid ding dong pony. Meanwhile, on the other side of the room, there's his brother digging through the horse manure. Oh, come on, man. Where there's smoke, there's fire.
Yeah, that's great. That's very poignant, and I think valuable. Completely valuable. What you just said is so poignant, because the lesson is a big one, and I agree with that. Obviously, we're human beings, and there's variations, but the point of that, I love it. I love it so much, because, well, we in ourselves contain the variable, and the externalities obviously are important, because but we're always confronted with walls, stumbling blocks, challenges, and so on and so forth. But the way we take it and the way we process it and react to it is what is in our ability to do. But I also love about that story, and I'm deriving from it. So it's not, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm deriving from it. So it's not that, hey, this got to be part of the story. But another part of it is that it also speaks to the possibility of, like, a person's design at some level is the way they're designed at some level, whereas another person varies. Kind of like there's people that, like, they're so loving and positive and stuff, and they'll see like this huge lion, and it's just a lion, we love animals, and then they cuddle up and it rips them to pieces and stuff. They just they're so into, and no matter what, and so I love it on that level. It was freaking great. That was a freaking great story.
It was just an old dumb joke. But
I think it
it does serve a purpose. It does serve a purpose. The optimistic kid is going to stay optimistic no matter what happens, and the pessimistic kid is going to find fault with anything.
I like it. I like it a lot. I think we should end with that, because we're right.
You think we should end with that?
Yeah,
okay. Well, just to kind of tie it all together and bring it back around to the Scottish on St. Andrew's Day. They talk about the difference between the British, the Irish, and the Scottish, and this falls in with our optimism and pessimism thing. And they say the British see the glass as half full, and the Irish see the glass as half empty. The Scottish see the glass and say, are you going to drink that? And that's how we can end it. I'm Scottish. Address your letters to me.
All right. So listen, we hope you enjoyed it. We go live every Tuesday at 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific here on YouTube. Trampled Underfoot Podcast on YouTube. We have a website by the same name, and we have a Facebook page by the same name. So trampledunderfootpodcast.com. And we're also sponsored by
Steve Nealon at Harneal Media, your one-stop website shop. This is your cue, Steve. He's out in the he's working his tail off back there. I'll edit this out. I can't edit this out. It's your edit. Never mind.
right.
You always get the easy edits. You always get the real easy edits.
You're not, stay on track. Stay on track.
Okay. Steve Nealon at Harneal Media, your one-stop website shop. If you're looking to improve your online presence and move beyond social media, you want a website of your very own, Steve is your man. If you're an experienced web designer and just looking for a web host, Steve is your man. He can take care of you. If you're a total newbie like me and have never done anything with a website before, Steve is your man. He will do as much or as little as you want him to do, and his prices run accordingly. If you're looking for a web store, you want to sell your items, your products, or your services, you want to create merch, Steve can hook you up with a on-demand printing company that will take care of everything. They handle the inventory, they handle the printing, they handle the shipping. You just sit back, smile, and watch the orders come in. That's Steve Nealon, your online guru at Harneal Media. That's HARNEAL media.com.
All right. So we'll catch you. You guys have a safe one, and we'll catch you next week, same time, same place. See ya.
Aye. You stretch that one out a ways.
I like to give it a nice
long
space
blank spot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man.
I didn't expect us to do the whole thing on that. I
didn't either. I had another one. I was trying to morph into another question, but that's cool. I'll save it for another day. Okay, let's see what's going here. Jamie Page showed up. Your ending? Something I said? No, Jamie, it's something you didn't say. And that was anything. You didn't say anything. So, let's see here.
Jamie Page.
It's Jamie's. No, I can't do that. That's trademarked. Let's see here. Trying to come up here to find some questions. Okay. Now, we could probably do a podcast on this alone. Rick French says that we're up against the curse of Oak Island these days. Now, I mentioned that to Eloy before we went live, and he was like, I've never heard of Oak Island. No. Oak Island was, if I'm not mistaken, it's in Canada. And it's an island off the coast, I think off the coast of Newfoundland. Correct me if I'm wrong, Rick. And there are rumors of this buried treasure in this quote unquote treasure chamber, which is basically a shaft right on the coast of this island. That if you try to get into it, it's going to let seawater flood in and just flood the whole thing out. But people are convinced there is some form of treasure down there in 2 chests. And this has been going on for decades. I can remember reading about this when I was a young kid, 6, 7 years old, something like that. So I don't know why they decided to turn it into a reality show. Evidently, there's some people trying to find it. Nova Scotia, Rick said. Okay, it's off the coast of Nova Scotia. So, anyway, that's basically the gist of it. They're trying to figure out some way of getting down into this shaft to find this treasure at the bottom without drowning themselves, basically.
When he said Scotia, Nova Scotia, I don't know why my brain jumped straight into "You're so vain" because there's a part where she
Yeah.
says Nova Scotia. I went straight into Carly
You know,
Simon, right? Is it Carly Simon?
Carly Simon. Yeah. Do you know what Nova Scotia means?
Yeah, New Scotland.
Right. Perfect.
I
Yep.
know that because Nova is a derivative of Latin.
Nueva. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And
No,
Scotia.
Nova. Nova itself is Latin.
Yep.
Nova. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Scotia, you can see it, right?
Yeah.
Scotia, Scotland.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. That was Scots Gaelic for Scotland.
Yeah.
Scotia. Let's see here. Trying to find out here. Greg says 10 seconds of the Beatles is too much for him. Jim Dockrell says the most influential band of the 20th century. Yeah, they're not for everybody.
Notice two Canadians, two wildly different results of what they think, and that is the point. But Greg would be the outlier in this thing according to population statistics.
I think Greg does that on purpose. I don't know. I don't know that for a fact.
For all I know, I'll just say this. For all I know, if it is what you're saying, then that means that Greg is at home with headphones on, listening to Rubber Soul while watching horror movies and not telling us about
He might be. He might just be twisting your tail.
Yeah. Well, he's not twisting my tail.
Well,
Don't add me to the because now you're encouraging him.
Now here's one here.
Give me one momento. I'm listening.
Okay, Dan
Oh,
Haryu.
wait, that's not the right button.
No, you shut the wrong. Dan Haryu says in 200 years they'll study the Beatles along with Mozart and Beethoven.
That's the most absurd thing I've ever heard.
I don't know. They might.
No, they haven't been. That's a true. Well, they have been today.
But if you look at, do you think they're studying the Beatles at Juilliard? I don't know. I'm not being flip. I'm asking that seriously.
I think there's courses. There's college courses. Mm-hmm. There's college courses about how to properly pick your nose. So
yeah, this is true. The political ramifications of Star Trek, for crying out loud. That was for you, Al. So okay, I don't know. They might. It's possible. It's hard to say what they'll be studying in 200 years. Then again, Mozart and Beethoven had absolutely no idea anybody would be studying their music.
I'm going to disagree. I'm going to disagree with the commenter about them. In 200 years, they're going to be studying Justin Bieber or whatever, and there will be posters, shirts, streets will be named after him, our satellite stations, kids, all male kids would be called that. The world will be a homage to Justin Bieber. That's my assessment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Haven't heard much out of the Biebs lately, have you?
And Shakira for the ladies.
Shakira, okay. Right. Dan Haryu also says Rubber Soul is where they took culture with them on a wild ride. Absolutely. And what gets me about it, though, about the whole Rubber Soul versus Please Please Me thing is, think about that. That was a span of 2 years. What other band has completely remolded and remodeled themselves that quickly? I mean,
no, and they said in the video. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say the growth of the band and the maturation, the maturity level of each member let's pick Sgt. Pepper, between Please Please Me and Sgt. Pepper, that was only 4 years. No other band that I can think of changed its sound, changed the direction of its sound that much in that short of a time.
Let me add this to complement that. In the thing, they were not even in their 30s yet. None of them.
Yeah.
In Let It Be, which was their last hurrah release,
Mm-hmm.
but they're second to last. They were not even 30 years old.
Yeah. Yeah. When you think about that, that's an absolutely insane ride. They were kids, they were teenagers.
It's unspeakable. It's unspeakable what they did,
Mm-hmm.
as because they were kids.
Yeah.
Our founding fathers, you could say, were very young, like within the span of
Yeah.
very young.
Yeah. But I mean, to grow that much, to push the technology that much, that fast, and mature that rapidly, musically speaking, it just blows me away. I can't think of another band that's done it. So, Dan Haryu also said they only toured for 2 years. Yeah. I thought it was a little bit longer than that. I thought 66 was their last live performance, wasn't it? Or was it 65?
66, they did the Candlestick Park, and
Yeah.
they were done. It
And
was
they said
during
that was it.
it was during the not Rubber Soul, but the Revolver, I think
Yes.
it was. And then they were done. Revolver, and they were done. So that was about 66. That was probably just 66 spot on.
Yeah. Okay. I think Jamie was going back and reading the comments. It says the British, I think he said pint, is more than the American pint. So the British drink more than the Americans. I win. Yeah, I don't drink, so you won anyway.
Or did he mean literally the British pink? So what did he say? So if you do that in the context of the British pink,
do we really want to go? The British pink is more than the British pint, and the American pint.
No, the British pink. Well, if we had to reword it, the British pink is more than the American pink.
No, the American pint. We got to read it as written.
No, well, I'm altering it because he started with pink.
Okay. Oh, okay.
I'm trying to win us. I'm trying to score us one here, and you're making it very difficult. Give me 1 second.
Well, JP Woodwork is not impressed with Oak Island. What a crock. Come on, Jamie. You know you love it. You know you love it. Okay, Jamie says a big packet of clam chowder. That's the treasure. Eloy, get hunting.
I could do that, Jamie Page, but I could also go down to my local whatever and get, it like that. So,
this is just me talking here, but I think if you're getting your clam chowder out of a packet, you need to up your game.
So that could be true after you taste that clam chowder and make the decision. Because if not, you are assuming that clam chowder is no good compared to what. If you ever tasted the clam chowder I'm talking about,
okay, but
it would be.
But you're not getting that out of a packet. An envelope, a packet, an envelope, like dry Kool-Aid, like If you're getting your clam chowder out of a packet like Kool-Aid, you got to up your game.
No, what they come in these plastic with like a nipple on it, and they put it in a. I've seen how they do it, and they put it in the whatever to.
Right, but it's not a dry powder mix. That's what I was talking about.
No.
Yeah. So let's see here. Greg says no, you're not. Not a chance. He's not listening to the Beatles. And Jamie says, I bet Greg is home singing Baby Shark out loud. That's a possibility. Let's see here. Let's see. And Greg confirmed it. He's singing Baby Shark with his granddaughter. Okay. Jim Dockrell says, according to Kanye, it'll all be about him. Who?
Kanye West.
Who? Oh, that's that dude Kim Kardashian's playing patty cake with. Okay. All right.
But notice, let me ask you this, because and you guys out there, and be honest. Have you ever, in order to have, and by the way, I agree with but I agree in a very biased way.
Me too.
Because I personally have never listened by any stretch of the imagination, have never consumed any music I know he's a musician, have consumed any music from him. The reason I push back against all that is because of the empty pop perception, and I'm like, ugh, and I push it to the side. My bias. But my question is to the folks out there and yourself: have you sat through a proper Kanye West release?
No. I have heard like maybe 7 seconds of one of his tunes on some show. They were talking about him just kind of peripherally, and they cut to a clip of him on a motorcycle and then cut back. But I can say I have never listened to an entire Kanye West song.
And can you admit?
But see, I'm no barometer, because I haven't listened to. I don't think I've listened to anything released after about 2000. So, you know,
but you can so at the same time, you can completely qualify, or not you can completely say I'm absolutely biased on this.
Yeah, I'm very biased.
But here's my question, and I'm asking people out there and they're answering. But here's my question, and I find it, you know why I find it funny? I find it funny because there is a point to which popular culture in our experience is set to a certain degree, and we do not push the needle because we basically integrate these musical people from the past. We integrate it into ourselves, so it's obviously we're stuck with what we like.
Well, I don't see it as being stuck. I know what I like. I'm just trying to think of anything made after the year 2000 that I have listened to. And I have to back up on that because AC/DC had a new release.
Yeah, but
and so did the Stones.
But you see what's happening, though.
Yes, I'm back to those groups, the groups that I know and the groups that I like.
Right. Yeah.
But there are other people. Joe Bonamassa, I've listened to some of his stuff, and
but he's an old school guy.
Yeah, right, exactly. But it's that style.
So hold on. So that's interesting. So there are people that I would not take into account from back in the day that now I will accept as part of a listening, background music or whatever, simply because of what is it, nostalgia.
Yeah.
I will allow for that. But the moment I see, and this is a funny thing, a bunch of dancers on a stage jiggling around in what I perceive as like just the most shallow. I don't care how many fringes they have on their little skirts, and they're twinkling and they're talking, and there's a hammer in their hand and all this weird. I see it all as garbage. I know that I'm being biased and I'm not really, but it's all I really need to know that I don't like it.
You need to get yourself to a Tina Turner show stat.
No, that's different. That's different. That's different. Although to be honest with you, back in the day, not so much although I don't listen to Tina Turner, but back in the day, I wasn't too keen on Tina Turner herself. But back in the day, I was listening during the 80s, so she had shifted. But remember, I'm accepting of stuff in the generally.
Well,
you and me, if I see some modern thing going on with the stars, and I am totally disqualifying it right there and then.
I disqualify more of it based on it's not my style of music. Because I know, for instance, there are people out there with a ton of talent. I actually like Mariah Carey's cover of Without You. She did a very good job with that song because she has the talent to pull it off. You know, she
Yeah.
did a very good job with it. And I think that there are some modern performers who could, if they took a couple of steps back, could bring back some of the old music if they really wanted to it. I've said it before on this podcast. I think that if Demi Lovato, she has the voice, if she got a couple of good backup singers, she could bring back some old Martha and the Vandellas Motown. And I'd love to see it.
No, you're right. There's a
So,
lot of
but
people.
then again, it's the style. That's my style of music. I like that style of music. I'm not denying they have talent.
Yeah.
Unlike you, I find the music to be soulless, plastic, artificial, poppy stuff.
Yeah. No, and so I agree with you that, and by default, there has to be good, solid musicians of immense talent and musical performance style and so on and so forth nowadays. But I think you're also right in that it has to do with the genre, because in the genre, like you mentioned, just to expand on it, there are sort of like markers that occur within that genre. In the rock and roll, you have the rebellion, but you also have a little bit of the sorry, Greg, the horror with the heavy metal thing, or you have a little bit of the, roadster
Blues.
kind of thing, or the blue. But you have these parameters that exist within that. And then in the pop world, it's more of going to the clubs and like tossing your hair around and like
and
all that.
and the overuse of auto tune, even
Yeah.
when
So
it's not necessary.
yeah, so there is that. There is that, so on that level. So I would accept a fringed out, like I had mentioned before, Steve Tyler, let's say.
Yeah.
Um
Oh God.
Years way before I'd accept some sort of like, I'm singing and the stars are shining, bling bling bling, and or whatever that
Yeah.
music. See, I don't even have a perception of
Modern modern pop and R&B is just not my style of music, and hip hop never was. Just by the same token, the same way country western was never my style of music. There are a few country tunes I actually like. They either have great lyrics or they're one of those songs that just get stuck in your head and you can't get rid of them. You have to like it, you know. Um, but by the same token, I'm not into classical either.
I can
You
I
know,
can dig my I can dig some classical, and I can dig some classical. You know what's good with classical? I don't know. Have you ever been when you go to Barnes and Noble and they have it in the background?
Mhm.
It is the perfect setting, especially if you lower it as background music to soothe and sort of like it does help extend.
Yeah, okay, I can see that, but
Yeah,
I'm not gonna rush out and buy the latest Yo-Yo Ma release. I'm
yeah,
just not that interested. It's not my genre of music, you
yeah.
know. But I don't know that you said something earlier about we are forced into our biases and we're forced into this type of music. I don't know that it's so much force in that.
Did I say we're forced?
Yeah, you said forced. And that kind of, I will agree with you on certain levels
I don't know.
because,
I don't remember. I said it doesn't make. In what context did I say forced?
well, you were starting to get into the older, grungier style, the older, rawer styles, and the difference between that and the modern music when you said it was soulless. But we wrap ourselves in those genres and we force ourselves into these genres. And
I don't
I
know that I
agree with
did.
I agree with you on a certain level in that, but only in that we don't have any choice. We like what we like. And you can put on a brave face and you can pretend all you want. But if you don't like something,
You don't
you
like it.
just don't like it. And that's all there is to it. You don't have to justify it. You don't have to do comparisons like I just did with R&B, pop, country, western, and classical. You just know you don't like it.
Yeah. Well, you don't, and you can if you want. I think it's quite. It's more like it's more like just a conversation that has no solid sort of foundation in like it's not a fact because it's such an opinion, right? Whatever you like in this and that. But I find it
Mhm.
very useful to say pop music sucks
Well,
and rock and roll kicks butt, mother truckers, and
but
but it's more of like a chest out sort of saying
yes,
type of thing.
exactly. We
Yeah,
were saying that when we were kids back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. We were
yeah,
saying it then. I
yeah.
mean, I was listening to, oh my God, I was listening to Kiss and Pink Floyd and Leonard Skinner and was saying Sean Cassidy and the Bay City Rollers suck because that was plastic poppy BS made for 13-year-old girls. And that's all it was. It was bubblegum pop meant to get daddy to open up the wallet and give Susie $1 so she could go buy a 45. That's all it was. I mean, you would need a machinist scale to measure the depth of any of that music. It was so shallow. Now, Jim Dockrell has an excellent point here. Most of today's music is quantized, which takes the human feel out of it. Quantized being taking every bar and stretching or shrinking it so the beat is exactly the same throughout the whole song. There is a guy on YouTube. His name is, I want to say his name is Alec. I may be wrong. His channel is called The Wings of Pegasus. And he's been on a kick with auto-tune here lately, where he is going back and listening to old recordings. And the first video I saw of his about the subject was talking about you can't hear auto-tune, but you can see it. And he put Freddie Mercury and Michael Bublé into this software and was showing the notes they hit. Freddie Mercury, these are old isolated tracks from various album recordings, pre-auto tune. So we know he did not use auto tune. And he's showing the waveforms and the notes that Freddie Mercury hits and his misses. A lot of people will say, and no, Jim, it's not Rick Beato. The channel is called The Wings of Pegasus. Not Rick Beato. But I can't remember his first name. I want to say it's Alec or Alex, one of the two, but I may be wrong there. And then he showed Michael Bublé, and he says, this is how you can see auto-tune. Now, nobody's going to stand there and say that Michael Bublé has a bad voice. He has a great voice. The problem is it's too pristine. He may not even know they're doing this to his recordings, but he shows right there on the spectrograph with the waveform, not the spectrograph, but right there in the software on the waveform, how Freddie Mercury, it's been said, had perfect pitch, but he'll miss notes just slightly. He'll be slightly sharp or slightly flat, but on average, it sounds right. And then he shows the waveform of Bublé's voice, and it is perfect right on the line. Perfect on the note, whether there's vibrato or not. And he's showing this is how you can see that auto-tune is being used. This Michael Bublé piece was auto-tuned. This over here with Freddie Mercury was not. It's about a 25-minute long video, and it was fascinating to watch. And he's gone back to several other recordings and checked them out. And he even actually he flat out said, I know this is sacrilegious. Don't kill me. But he applied auto-tune to that isolated Freddie Mercury track, and it just sounded off. It didn't sound like Freddie Mercury. So Jim is absolutely right about a lot of the quantification, or how did he put it?
Quantizing.
Quantizing to get that absolutely perfect 120 beats per minute tempo. But it doesn't sound natural. It doesn't sound like a band. It doesn't sound like people are playing it.
So let me throw in my 2 cents with all that. So the auto tune is similar to the quantizing
Mm-hmm.
in certain way,
Right.
but the quantizing has to do with your, like, let's your beats, let's
Right.
say.
Your tempo.
So
Yeah.
when the engineer presses record, the drummer, particularly with the drummer, you could do it with everything, but the drummer's like the most glaring example. The drummer will play a song, let's say it's a 3 minute and 49 second song, and he starts off at the beginning with the band playing, let's say, or even if he's playing it alone to the pre-recorded music, and by the end of the 3 minute and 49 second song, throughout his performance, because he's a human being,
Right.
the thing that you mentioned with the vocal
Mm-hmm.
situation is that you'll have him lagging,
Right.
or you'll have him slightly moving forward in the beat.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is that throughout that performance, you don't have a perfect within the measure cycle of a
Right.
drum beat.
Right.
So what the quantizing ends up doing is similar to the auto tune, in that it's going to restrain or restrict that sort of, like, well, it's literally within that bar, right? That
Right.
cycle. So if it's a dum dum ba, and that repeats again and again, it's going to fix it in the parts where it went a little forward and a little back. But what happens is, just like you mentioned with the singing,
Mm-hmm.
it also removes the humanity in the drumming area. Likewise, it removes the humanity in the guitar, because even if you have an error in your
Right.
guitar playing, sometimes, maybe actually most of the time, the errors is what makes things convince or natural, in
Mm-hmm.
order to make a person feel comfortable, as opposed to feel rushed. If you
Right.
if a person, the listener, is feeling rushed or just pushed over the edge because everything is so pristine, you're losing a little of that human. So the quantizing is what I've used it in the past, especially when you have no drummer, or when you're a bad drummer. So you'll use it and stuff. But there's also, I think that auto tune is usable in
I
certain
think they
situations.
I think they both have their place.
They have their place, exactly.
But again, you're absolutely right. You remove so much of the humanity out of it because, as you were saying, when you keep that steady, even beat, you're not accounting for human emotion. And maybe you want to increase the tempo slightly in this one passage, and maybe you want to back it off slightly in this passage here. Now, yes, the engineer can, if you know that going in, the engineer can program that in, I'm sure. But it's less spontaneous. There's no humanity in there. It becomes mechanical.
If you
And
overuse it, if
yes,
it's to fix, if it's because there's surgery, they call it surgery. You can be surgical in a song, and
hmm,
maybe there's an area, and you don't want to do the whole performance again, or you don't, for
right.
whatever reason, the singer,
Yeah,
in that one verse, it's so horrendous, and for whatever reason can't repeat it because he's off to London, or just
yeah,
a huge amount of things. The tool is there in
sure.
case, in a surgical, limited manner. Well, it's not there for just that, it's there for whatever you want. But
For a lot of reasons, yes.
in that particular case, in a very limited way, I can see the utility in it and not damage a performance.
Right.
But in the case of some sort of, like, the modern pop,
Well,
whatever,
yeah.
they just pump it to the max, and then
When all your recordings rely on it, that's all you're ever going to be able to do. I
yeah,
found that video. I'm posting a link to it in the chat right now, where on the Wings of Pegasus channel, where he compares Freddie Mercury with Michael Bublé, and talks about auto-tune. You can't hear it, but you can see it.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to put it on our Facebook page because we're not talking about this in the audio portion of the podcast. But it's there in the chat for anybody who'd like to check it out after we're done. Pro tip, right click, open a new tab. So, but
is that how you do it?
That's how I do it. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So right click.
Oh, no, not from here.
No, not from here. Not here in StreamYard. You can't do anything with it. It'll just show like so.
Yeah.
But that's I'm talking about on the live chat out there. They can check that out. But let's see here. Okay, here we go. Jim Dockwell says Rick Beato quantized some of John Bonham's tracks and they sound like crap. Yes. Just to show how much he actually speeds up and slows down during a song, but it works for the song. Exactly. There's that human touch to it, that human feel, because you don't know what emotions are going through the musicians when they're recording that track in the studio. And you don't know what they're going to think of it. I mean, maybe maybe Bonham went back and recorded a whole nother drum track for it. Or maybe he came in and added fills here and there or what have you.
No, it's normal. Normal.
You just never know what emotion is going through a musician's mind as they're recording and they listen to it on playback.
It's normal for people in a live situation because they are people. In every situation, for there to be, if not the whole band, one member of the band, the variables of human, whether you retard a note or you accelerate and accentuate some sort of like drum hit or a vocal line, it's inevitable in any live situation, and it's welcome because I mean we're human beings, and I mean
it adds that warmth that isn't there. It adds that soul. We keep talking about today's soulless music. There it is right there. There's no soul because it's all been processed.
Yeah.
The soul has been processed out of the music.
Yeah, but it's also so let me throw this angle as well. It's also the genre and the people's brains that are creating said music that to begin with.
There's some truth in that.
That to begin with, that genre is catering to a certain vibe or idea, whereas with rock, so if you took and did some weird thing with your autotune and you're having a rock song going on, you may not like it, you may like it, but it's within the context of, and so you're like more liable because of your personal like to, but this whole genre of the pop world, there's nothing that can fix that.
Well,
in my mind.
But I can listen to some old R&B. We're talking about 70s and early 80s R&B, but I don't like the stuff after about 1988, 89. It's like there was a shift in the genre and I just didn't like it. Yeah. It's kind of like that shift that happened between what was called rock and roll in like 63, 64. And when that shift came, starting with Rubber Soul to bring it back around in 65, it went in a new direction. And I followed that new direction. And there were a few bands that held back in the old stuff, in the older style. And I really wasn't much for them. Some of them I liked, but some of them looked like they were trying too hard to hold on to the old style that just wasn't working anymore. And I liked where the exploration was going. I still liked the old stuff. I mean, I could put on Elvis or I could put on the Big Bopper or Buddy Holly, but I liked where the Beatles were going, and I liked where the Who was going, and I liked where the Stones were going, and I liked when Black Sabbath came along and all the rest of them. And forget about the 1910 Fruit Gum Company. Forget about Strawberry Alarm Clock. I didn't give a damn about those people. They weren't real to me. Give me a CCR album. Or even Blood, Sweat, and Tears, which was primarily a jazz band. They had some good stuff as well. I mean, popular music took a major shift back then, and some of the old stuff was good, but some of the shift I didn't follow. And I certainly didn't follow the shift into hip hop. They lost me. And it's just because I just am not much for it. Again, it's over processed. You know, it's like, would you rather have a, yes, exactly, Greg, processed like a packet of clam chowder?
So good.
You know, instant soup, you know?
So funny.
There we go. There's our new merch. Eloy's Old Mother Trucker instant clam chowder.
All you need is boiling water and the will to eat.
Yes. Boiling water and the will to eat while we suck out your will to live.
Yeah, everybody's opposed to package. Everybody's opposed to what is it? Dry powdered. Everybody's opposed to dry powdered clam chowder until they're stuck on an island with nothing to eat.
Yeah, but where's this packet showing up from magically? I mean, yeah, you're going to do what you got to do to survive. And there you go. There's your first customer. Al says he wants to place an order for a case of it. Eloy's Old Mother Trucker instant clam chowder.
You know what I pictured? I pictured myself in the kitchen with a grater and just grating the dried ingredients into like packets and sealing as a business and stuff, and hiring like a staff and stuff.
Get rid of that grater. You need an industrial size mortar and pestle to grind it all up. Get Vigo over there sweeping it into packets so you can seal them later. Oh boy. Jim Dockrell then again says, I hit a lot of wrong notes on the guitar. I just say it's jazz. Well, you can get away with that, you know.
You can't get away with that. You can and you can't, depending. Okay, because there's no wrong, because you can say you are experimental, but you know, I mean,
yeah, you can say there's wrong. I mean, if you're holding the guitar with the strings against your stomach, you're wrong. You know, you can strum on the back of the guitar all day long and it's not going to sound like a guitar. It's going to sound like somebody scraping the back of a guitar.
Let me tell you something. It's interesting. There's one, I'm sure there's many, but the one that sticks out with this particular thing you guys are saying is Trout Mask Replica.
Yes, you've talked about it before.
And that album, honestly, it's genius. And yet it's a nightmare. But it's genius and a nightmare. It's not proper, but they're doing it on purpose, and there is reasoning behind them. It's a weird... So that's an example of... But like somebody that hits a wrong note on, you know, my Sharona, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
You know, you can't hit a wrong note and play Bebop Balubu, Whap Bam Boom and get, you know, the desired effect. It's just not, you know.
Interesting little side note here, apropos of absolutely nothing. You said My Sharona. How old were you when you discovered Sharona as a girl's name?
I always knew it was a girl's name.
I didn't. It was like 4 or 5 years. And I found out, oh, okay, that's a girl's name. I had no idea what they were talking about. I just knew I liked the do 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 do.
That was a great song.
My favorite of theirs is actually not that song. They did another one called You Can't Put a Price on Love. I liked that one much more than My Sharona. Very good. More laid back. Just a guy with a relatively clean Telecaster. Do 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 do. Excellent tune. Excellent tune.
What was that band? My Sharona.
The Knack.
The Knack.
The Knack.
Yeah.
You know, people say, well, they were a one-hit wonder. They had 2 hits, but what can you say?
I mean, that's more than, because that was a big deal. That song.
It was a huge deal.
So at the end of the day, you know, I mean, even Milli Vanilli, if you can do if you can pull off the Milli Vanilli, although the shame with that
Mhm.
that comes with that is her.
Yeah.
Not to mention the clothing choices, but um, um, but if you can pull off a Milli Vanilli, I mean, other than the fact that they ended up like a mess, I mean, what the hell? What are you gonna say to that? You know, they did their thing, and
Exactly.
yeah. So
But what can you look? You know, um, looking up when My Sharona was 1979. That was one of those songs that you could not escape. You could not get away from it. So 79, I was 20. No, 79, I was 18. Yeah, 18. You could not get away from that song. It was everywhere.
yeah,
And it was, and it's funny how we process things like that, because Kansas's Dust in the Wind was the same way. If you
yeah,
put on a radio station, you can jump in the car, turn on the radio, Dust in the Wind was on. We only had two channels up here that played, two radio stations that played pop music. If it wasn't on one, it was on the other. My Sharona was the same way, but I didn't get tired of that one like I did Dust in the Wind.
Do you remember that song? That was I associate it for some reason because maybe of the vibe, with Dust in the Wind, where it's the lyrics are something like, down to Gorky Park,
No, that
change,
was the Winds of Change,
Scorpions,
the Scorpions. Yeah.
Scorpion. For some reason, I always the vibes of both of those songs, I always connected them. I I really back then I didn't like the song, but now looking back, um, I like it. But back then it was like slow, and I'm like, oh goodness, again,
We
and they played it
were
over and over and over and over. But yeah,
we were in Germany when that came out, and the Scorpions, being a German band, they
yeah,
played it ad nauseum on Armed Forces Radio.
yeah,
And I got tired of it then. I
yeah,
don't own a Scorpions album,
yeah.
not a single one, and that's probably the last song that I mean, I've got a little list of songs by various artists that I like that just got overplayed to the point to where I can't listen to it anymore.
Do you remember?
I'll skip it.
Do you remember they played? Well, I don't know if you had MTV back then there.
No, we didn't have MTV on Armed Forces Radio, but it was around. I mean, I remember MTV before I went over.
It was played on MTV like it almost seemed like, because we would hang as friends and
Mhm.
stuff, and it's like it was back on again, and we'd all be like, oh, it was just again and again and again. It was like torture, and I did not appreciate it. But now looking back, maybe
Mhm.
it's because they psychologically force fed it into our brain.
Drove it into your brain, yeah. Yeah, there are songs like that that are just get driven into your head, and as much as you may not like them, they're there for good. um do you have any tunes like that you just they overplayed it so much you just don't care if you ever hear it again? Like
I
with
can't
me,
think of it. I
Kansas
can't think of
Dust
it
in
right
the
now.
Wind, if it comes on, I change the channel. I got sick of hearing it. um Jim Croce, Bad Bad Leroy Brown. But that's mainly because of my brother. He had the album, and that's the only song he ever played off that album. I'm like, just let the needle go once. Just let it go once. You know, it was a year before I heard anything else off of that album. He played that song, I mean, just over and over and over and over. I don't care if I ever hear it again.
I
I love everything else he's done, but that song, I'm sick of it.
you mentioned you repeated a word that I used before, and I use it every now and then, and it's just a little catchphrase, and that's mother trucker.
Yeah.
There's a song where I actually lifted that from, and it just became part of my go-to
Mhm.
vocabulary whenever the moment arises or I so choose. And that's from a Jim Croce song, and I think it was from West Coast Turnaround, Speedball
Speedball
Tucker.
Tucker, yeah.
And I used to play that song and
Uh-huh.
all his songs. I loved
Mhm.
all his songs. Uh, but that song was so energetic and cool, and the story, and in it, if I'm not mistaken, because I think that's where I lifted it from. He says, "And all the mother truckers would be something like a man like me."
Yeah. Would tell you that the boy is mad to be driving a rig like that.
Yeah.
Well, he says all them other truckers.
All them other truckers. So I grabbed other truckers.
Uh-huh.
I guess that's where I got it from. Maybe I got it from somewhere else, but I remember that. And I took it and made it into my own thing. But now you're saying, and all them other truckers.
You may have inadvertently started us on another podcast episode here, but one of them that I've been picking up lately, I fall down rabbit holes on YouTube. I'm a sap for YouTube. I'm watching this barbecue guy in Texas, and one of his favorite phrases is, "We're going to put these bad Larrys on the grill right now." And that's what it is. Oh, these bad Larrys are beautiful. And where he came up with bad Larrys, I have absolutely no idea.
There has to be a point where
there has to be a backstory on that. All I know is that I've been thinking bad Larry and using bad Larry here for about the last week.
That's a beautiful thing about, language and stuff. I guess we have touched on it slightly in the past. I think we should wrap up because now
I think so too. We're almost 2 hours.
But I'll say this. We have touched on that sort of broad subject in the past, but I think it's worth at some point revisiting because I like that language little shift and stuff. But let's go ahead and call it.
Okay, we can go ahead and do that. And just for Al, just so he can get My Sharona, he said he now I got My Sharona playing in my head. Just to kind of clear that head, just start thinking the final countdown.
We could keep going, but we're gonna have to stop. But I will say this: one incredible thing about what you just did there and joking here, is that but check it out. So I find it interesting, and I wonder if it happens to you. And if it happens to these guys out there, and I'm sure that a variation of it, but every song you mentioned, in my head, it started playing, and I could hear the notes in my head as clear as can be.
Yep.
And that's something else that we could, because it's interesting. You brought up a song, and my brain went down the hall and grabbed the information, brought it back, and said, "Here you go,"
and started playing it.
And and pressed the button play. So that's an interesting, also another thing, because you triggered in me and likely in them. Well, no, you did when the one.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting little angle that one day we could get into as well.
Okay.
We'll call it. Are you triggered yet?
Well, there you go.
Okay.
All right. Let's go ahead and wrap it up.
All right, guys. I enjoyed it. I hope that you all enjoyed it. We will see you next time. Have a great week and peace.